Hey everyone, I'm out here in the garage. What we're going to be doing today is replacing the rearward bushings in the 2004 Honda Pilot's lower control arms. So stay tuned. So if you're new to the channel, I just want to welcome you here, and hopefully you'll consider subscribing if you like what you see. Also, check out Car Apprentice on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I post lots of pictures and videos on those platforms before I post anything on YouTube. And occasionally I'll post things on those platforms I don't post on YouTube. Also, check out the website at carapprentice.com. And don't forget to hit the like button if you like this video. So we're going to be doing today is replacing the rearward bushings or compliance bushings in the 2004 Honda Pilot's lower control arms. Now, I do have a 12-ton press that I could use to do this job, but I thought I'd show you a method using some tools you can borrow from your local auto parts store. So, let's get into it. Alright, so with the front end of the car on jack stands, we'll remove the passenger side wheel. Check out the video I made on jacking up the front end of the Honda Pilot if you're unsure. Next, we're going to disconnect the lower ball joint from the knuckle. First, I'm using these vice grip pliers to remove the split pin that passes through the ball joint stud and the castle nut. Since the ball joint is just below the axle, a ratchet and socket won't fit on the castle nut. So instead, I'm using a 19mm box wrench with another wrench hooked to it for leverage. To dislodge the ball joint from the knuckle, a ball joint removal tool is best. Another option that may work is to hit the area where the ball joint passes through the knuckle with a sledgehammer to cause vibration and pop the ball joint free. Since the Pilot's ball joint has a larger stud base than the end of the tool's jaws can accommodate, I use a sanding drum on a Dremel and a file to enlarge and smoothen the jaws. Next, we'll grease the tool's threads and add some grease to the ball joint's boot to prevent friction, then set it in place on the ball joint. And I'll add, space permitting, I would normally reinstall the castle nut upside down and flush with the top of the ball joint stud before setting the tool in place. This helps protect the stud from damage during the procedure. Alright, so with the tool in place, we're going to crank it down with a 19mm wrench. Even though I know it's coming, the pop gets me every single time. With the ball joint free, we'll tackle the two bushing bolts next. Both bolts require a 17mm socket, so we'll break them loose with a breaker bar, then take them out. Alright, so we're finally at the point where we can remove the lower control arm. The ball joint end of it should be raised so that the bushings can slide straight out of the brackets. One thing I'll say here is to be very careful to not put too much stress on the axle. And there it is. Okay, so now it's time to replace the bushing. I've had to get creative in the past with the OEM 27023 ball joint press kit to replace ball joints or bushings on other cars, so I figured I'd give it a shot here. The outer diameter of the medium-sized receiver cup and the bushing are nearly the same, so I decided to use it to press out the bushing. I used a flat stock of 1/4-inch steel between the cup and the C-clamp frame. Here's my final setup. Also be sure to grease the threads of the large screw. To turn the screw, I use a 22mm socket on a breaker bar and eventually switch to a long-handled ratchet. Now, this whole setup will collapse once the bushing is free from the control arm, so just a warning. You may want to place something soft on the floor to absorb the impact. And there it goes. For demonstration purposes, this is the control arm from the driver's side. I'm just showing how I cleaned it up with a little sandpaper before installing the new bushing. A little grease may also be helpful to help the bushing slide into place easier. Here's the new bushing from Honda. The part number is 51393-S3V-A01. Pressing the bushing back into place proved to be more challenging. I cut a scrap piece of 1x6 oak because of its hardness. I proceeded to drill a hole with a hole saw that's about 1/2 inch smaller in diameter than the outer diameter of the bushing. A scrap piece of 1/4-inch steel would have been ideal, but I don't have a tool for cutting holes in thick metal. Here's my setup. The bushing made a groove in the wood, so I had to flip the block over so I could continue to press the bushing as flush as possible with the control arm surface. To finish driving the bushing into place, I turned the flat steel stock on its end, placed it across the bushing, then hit it with a brass sledgehammer. Alright, so we're going to put the control arm back on the car. First, I clean out the bore in the knuckle. I also have to fix the ball joint stud's threads with a file. I added a little 3M silicone paste to the bushings and the brackets on the car to help the control arm slide back in easier. Starting with the control arm as level as possible with the brackets is best. Again, be very careful with the axle. Next, I installed the two 17mm bolts, not tightening them to spec just yet. ball joint's 19mm castle nut is up next. Again, not tightening it to spec just yet. Alright, so I'm going to lift the car off the jack stands to place its weight on the suspension before tightening the fasteners to spec. The spec for the 17mm bushing bolts is 69 foot-pounds. And the spec for the 19mm castle nut is 43 to 51 foot-pounds. I didn't have a torque wrench that could fit on the castle nut, so I just tightened it by feel and made sure the holes in the stud were facing forward. I then installed a new split pin. The OEM Honda part number is 90701-S3V-A01. The last thing to do is to reinstall the wheel, then tighten the lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds with the car on the ground. And that's it. Alright, so there you have it. There's replacing the rearward bushing in the lower control arm of the 2004 Honda Pilot. So I would just use a press kit like I showed in this video. You can also use a press if you have one, but typically a lot of people don't have presses in their garages. That's why I showed this particular method here. So hopefully this information is helpful, and thanks for watching.